tradition and history, especially in the Islamic arches and doorways. We know that the gardens were an important aspect of the various incarnations of the palace. But by the late 1950s, the palace and its gardens had been abandoned and were badly neglected until it was bought by Carmen Marañón and her husband Alejandro. And although he died quite soon afterwards, she devoted the rest of her life to restoring both the building and making a garden around it. And the garden's fascinating because it's a combination of different cultures. You obviously have the Islamic culture, which relates to the building. But she also planted all these cypresses, which give it a distinctive Mediterranean silhouette and feel. And on top of that, you have a very strong Italian influence. And it's this quite unlikely combination which actually makes a very Spanish garden, at least of a distinctive period. The second garden I'm visiting in Toledo is very special. It is private, so I can't say exactly where it is or who it belongs to, but very few people get a chance to see it.
Come on.
It shares the fact that its story is integral, in this case literally, with the building it is set amongst. The garden is set in the ruins of a 15th century monastery, and the grandeur of the surviving structure is matched by the scale of the planting, combining to make something breathtakingly dramatic. However, there was no sign of a garden here when work started on renovating the site in 1985. There are a number of different sections or parts of the garden, but the heart of it is centered on the ruins of the old church and cloisters. Obviously, the first impression is to be overwhelmed by the scale, to have a full-blown monastery becoming the structure of a garden. But actually, the thing that strikes me most from a gardening point of view is the restraint. For many people, there would be a temptation to plant climbing roses and all kinds of things to cover the walls and use the walls as a kind of glorious trellis. But the restraint and just having the green, simple shapes and letting the building be as much part of the garden as it deserves, which is a lot because it's so extraordinary, I think really adds to the beauty. The monastery was a thriving religious and cultural center until the 19th century, when it was pillaged by Napoleon's troops and later confiscated by the government, who then sold it to become a private residence. And the current owner's family bought it in the 1940s, although the restoration didn't begin for another 40 years after that. Really interesting to see that the Christian arch compared to the Islamic arches of Palazzo de Galiana. The fusion of Islamic and Christian cultures is what I find makes Spanish historical gardens and buildings so fascinating. So here in one section, there's a very Christian laurel maze amongst the cypress trees. In another, there's a water labyrinth. But the most dramatic feature of the garden is